All right, so we got another unfortunate update here on the ongoing prosecution of Julian Assange for the crimes of exposing the crimes of the U.S. empire. So here from Jake Johnson of Common Dreams, we got a great breakdown on the latest. He says, a chilling message to journalists the world over. UK approves Assange extradition to the United States. And they got a subheader here saying Julian Assange's wife, Stella, slammed the UK government for moving to send the WikiLeaks publisher to the country that plotted his assassination. So just one small but absolutely insane component of this entire story. Trump's CIA literally tried to have Julian Assange assassinated while he was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in Britain. So just, again, one small component of this, but absolutely wild that there's some justification here being put forward by the UK courts that Julian Assange is somehow going to be treated fairly within the US judicial system by the same government that literally tried to have his assassination conducted. But we get into some of the details here. They say the UK government Friday formally approved the extradition of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the United States to face espionage charges, a decision that human rights groups condemned as a dire threat to journalism worldwide. And of course, I mean, that's obviously a fantastic characterization there. It's obviously accurate. I mean, Julian Assange he has a publication of WikiLeaks, which the whole idea of this is to expose the crimes of the most corrupt and powerful people in the entire world. So if you were going to charge him under the Espionage Act, no less, that basically sets the standard that no publisher, no journalist around the entire world, no matter which country you happen to come from, is safe from the US government and the prospects of them potentially being prosecuted for publishing information that the US government deems to be, classified or off limits to the public. In this case, specifically relating to Julian Assange, we're talking about the fact that he exposed rampant war crimes and cover-ups of those war crimes committed by the US military within Iraq and Afghanistan. So they continue here saying Assange, who has been detained in a high-security London prison since 2019, is expected to appeal the move by UK Home Secretary Priti Patel, whose office insisted that the publisher's extradition to the United States would not be incompatible with his human rights. The entire trial is incompatible with human rights or any, perceived notion of freedom of the press. So that in and of itself is completely ridiculous, but they say including his right to a fair trial and freedom of expression. She literally just had the audacity to say this is not a violation of his human rights, or including his right to a fair trial and to his freedom of expression. It's not a threat to his freedom of expression to prosecute him for publishing the crimes of the United States government. That's literally a direct threat to not just his freedom of expression, but to freedom of expression for any journalist or journalistic publications in the entire world. But again, completely fucking ridiculous there. But they continue saying Amnesty International's Agnes Callamard, who previously worked as a United Nations human rights expert, disagreed with Patel's assessment, warning that, quote, allowing Julian Assange to be extradited to the United States would put him at great risk and sends a chilling message to journalists the world over. And they got another quote here saying, if the extradition proceeds, Amnesty International is extremely concerned that Assange faces a high risk of prolonged solitary confinement, which would violate the prohibition on torture and other ill treatment. Unfortunately for Julian Assange, the United States government is absolutely no stranger to torture and certainly doesn't have a principled stance against it. But they continue saying diplomatic assurances provided by the United States that Assange will not be kept in solitary confinement cannot be taken on face value given previous history, and that's absolutely true. We've seen this in other cases as well, where the United States makes assurances to foreign governments like Spain. There was that one specific example, and basically just goes completely against any previous agreements that they had made beforehand, and just goes with whatever the fuck that they want to do. And obviously, the same institutions that were plotting to have him assassinated really don't have any real care for actual norms and standards and precedents and all of the potential conflicts that this is going to have as a part of this trial. But they continue here saying, if found guilty on all 17 Espionage Act charges, which were originally brought by the Trump administration, Assange could face a 175-year prison sentence, which the U.S. has said he could serve in his native Australia. Now, this component of it, we just covered on the channel a couple weeks ago, how Australians did elect a more leftist government, including their Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, but unfortunately, with recent statements that we've had, it seems like they are really just planning on following in the exact same status quo that the previous right-wing conservative Scott Morrison was following, basically being a lapdog for the United States and the State Department in this instance. So, can't really count on this newly, somewhat more leftist coalition in Australia to bail Julian Assange out of this. But we also had a great breakdown here from Salon from a couple of months ago that I think was good just in terms of adding context to exactly why the United States is going after Julian Assange in this way. So here from Salon, they say, the execution of Julian Assange, he exposed the crimes of empire, and that can't be tolerated. So, a little bit of details here. They say Assange is charged in the U.S. under 17 counts of the Espionage Act and 1 count of hacking into a government computer, completely unsubstantiated. The charges could see him sentenced to 175 years in prison, even though he is not a U.S. citizen and WikiLeaks is not a U.S.-based publication. And if he is found guilty, it will effectively criminalize the investigative work of all journalists and publishers anywhere in the world and of any nationality who possess classified documents to shine a light on the inner workings of power. And again, criminalizing this style of journalism, which is just all fucking journalism that exists. This is what it means to have a free press. It means holding the most powerful people and institutions accountable. So of course, you're going to come across some information that those powerful institutions and governments and people are not going to want you to release. But that's exactly what it means to have a free press. And so, this is part of the reason why the Obama administration did not pursue charges in the same way that the Trump and Biden administrations have been. It was literally Obama himself who said that if we go through with prosecuting Julian Assange under the Espionage Act for the type of stuff that he was doing, then that would put in jeopardy work that outlets like the New York Times do on a literal daily basis. But they continue here saying this mortal assault on the press will have been orchestrated, we must not forget, by a democratic administration. It will set a legal precedent that will delight other totalitarian regimes and autocrats who, emboldened by the United States, will gleefully seize journalists and publishers, no matter where they are located, who publish inconvenient truths. And there is no legal basis to hold Julian Assange in prison. There is no legal basis to try him, a foreign national, under the Espionage Act. The CIA spied on Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy through a Spanish company, UC Global, contracted to provide the embassy with security, and this spying included recording the privileged conversations between Assange and his lawyers, completely illegal. This fact alone invalidates any future trial, and Assange, who after 7 years in a cramped room without sunlight in the embassy, has been held for nearly 3 years in a high-security prison in London, so the state can, as Nils Melzer, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, has testified, continue on the unrelenting abuse and torture it knows will lead to his psychological and physical disintegration. The persecution of Assange is designed to send a message to anyone who might consider exposing the corruption, dishonesty, and depravity that defines the black heart of our global elites. And I think that's a great way of putting it. I mean, listen, again, we talk about Julian Assange over and over and over again, and yet it seems like the status quo is just going to continue. I mean, we have a Democratic administration, a Democratic House of Representatives, a Democratic Senate, and still this is going to be, carried through on. And the reason for that is, of course, the same reason why we have always bipartisan consensus when it comes to things like the military-industrial complex or billionaires and how we treat corporate America. I mean, it all comes down to the same exact idea. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump trying to formulate plans to assassinate Julian Assange or Joe Biden continuing with the attempted persecution of Julian Assange under the Espionage Act. Both of these things are, of course, bipartisan because both parties in this country serve the same exact institutions that are honestly just embarrassed, but also are being exposed by the type of information that he was reporting on and releasing as a journalist. So, I mean, really what Julian Assange was doing in releasing these documents is the epitome of what it means to have a free press. And obviously, the precedent that is going to be set by this continued persecution is going to set, a dangerous precedent for all journalists around the world. It doesn't matter which country you're from. It doesn't matter what the context is. If you are somebody who is legitimately doing the job of a journalist, trying to hold the most powerful people and institutions accountable, then this is effectively criminalizing this from the most powerful country in the entire world.